I want to say, first of all, thank you to two dear friends of mine, Paco and Eliot, for doing this with me tonight. I so appreciate it, particularly when they have to perform. I would never do that if I were them, but I appreciate that they're doing it. I'm going to actually start out on a little bit of a somber note, because I think it's very important. The world of music lost one of its greatest musicians a couple of months ago, who I know was a huge, dear friend of Paco, and also a great inspiration. I just wanted to start a little bit somber, saying a few words about our loss of Paco Lucía. If you could just say a few things, I know it's huge, it's a huge thing.
It is like the compass of, the fine north. In flamenco is disappeared. He was just so fundamental, really, in the way the flamenco is now played, understood, engaged with. Paco was absolutely fundamental, absolutely essential, and with honesty, the highest caliber, never pretending to be doing anything that he wasn't doing, but always going out in different directions, but always with the absolute trunk of the tree of tradition, absolutely in his playing, in his mind, his heart, and everywhere. He was just so fundamental. I can't really begin to say how sorry, not only myself, certainly myself, but the world of flamenco is, and how much poorer the world of flamenco is without that fantastic genius.
Yeah, that's great. I actually went through as a surprise, I just have to show the audience, but I went through my record collection, and I actually found this Double Paco record of I think it was just 2 years ago, right? Of the two
It's
of you.
my son.
Yes, it's right. This will be available if you want to look at it later. No, but it is so huge, and I know Eliot as well. You actually have played some of Paco's music. You've transcribed some things and played them live, and you really,
I love his music, of course. It was a great inspiration for all of us. Whatever kind of guitar, whatever kind of music you played, and I think that, as Paco has said, of course, Paco Lucía had this obvious, blinding virtuosity, but that wasn't even really the point. It kind of reminds me one time when I was traveling in Italy, I went to hear the Juilliard Quartet. They did the Kunst der Fuge, the Bach Art of Fugue, with the quartet, and I went to see Joel Krosnick, the cellist, and Joel says, he's doing it upside down and backwards and inverted and everything else. He said, and that's not even the point. And that's what you would say about Paco's instrumental virtuosity, of course, was unheard of. But it was not just virtuosity, it was sort of life energy. And, for obviously someone like myself couldn't understand that music in the way of great flamenco artists like Paco. But for all of us, it was a tremendous loss, and he was just I think at a time when Spain itself is suffering so much in so many ways, and there's so much corruption everywhere, he was sort of a figure in and outside of music, I think, for the whole country. It was like, it was this one sort of unsullied person, who unfortunately was called way too early.
Well, and he was amongst many other things, a great collaborator, and that brings us sort of to you guys, and to constantly, stretching the barriers. Flamenco being an somewhat improvised art on forms and dance forms, and the world of classical music, if what we call classical guitar sort of has this literature that goes back, to the 16th century. Given the two of your sort of diverse backgrounds, and where do you find the two of you kind of meet artistically?
Well, we actually did a program once in Córdoba, actually, which we called Flamenco and Baroque or something. Flamenco means Baroque. I don't remember what we called it, but pointing out exactly those parallels that you're talking about, which is Baroque music, which is, for me, almost my first love in music. Of course, it's based on a bunch of dance forms. All the Bach suites are elaborated dance forms, and the form of the chaconne and the passacaglia, the variations on a ground bass, is really what flamenco is, right? So that was a very natural place to go. And if I try to do basso continuo in the Baroque style, well, of course, Paco's doing really what we were calling it in Baroque terms. He's a kind of a basso continuo on these flamenco toques, that also are ancient and have a noble history, and then each person gives his special, aire to the whatever the form that's being played. So
yeah, that's a great. I love that. What is it? Did you find, like Paco, for instance? What is it about, and having been around classical guitar your whole life, is there something about, quote, what we call classical guitar, its technique, that you find alluring to you?
Well,
or the world?
I mean, I just love the classical guitar anyway. This adventure, though, is entirely his fault. He just dreamed up the idea of getting myself to learn some classical. Well, I mean, I've played this and that over the years, but believe me, I'm no classical guitarist. But anyway, my brother Eliot just got me interested in doing this actually wonderful adventure. And of course, he's very keen on flamenco, so he's very keen to learn the intricacies, whatever it is that flamenco has, that on the other side of the spectrum. So we approached it simply. I have to learn this stuff, I mean, I can't improvise Baroque music, so I had to learn it. Again, he's responsible for. So the thing is that, I might as well say, if anything goes wrong with this wonderful adventure, if I mess up, if anything goes wrong at all, make sure that we blame him, not me. Anyway, but of course, it is a wonderful thing because I do love the classical guitar. And if in any way, I mean, he's doing all the virtuosic material, really. But if in any way I can come close, approach this wonderful world of classical guitar, which in fact, thanks to Eliot, we have done now for a little while, I'm delighted and very, very pleased. I just hope that I don't mess up too much.
Well, speaking,
but
well, he's being as usual way too modest. First of all, I think I'm sort of an aficionado of flamenco. It's like in the Magic Flute in the last act where you're locked. These two armed men are standing in front of the temple and you can't get in. That's sort of my relation to flamenco. I keep trying to get in, and it's like it's so difficult to do it somewhere near decent. So if Paco's here, I can lean on him and ride on his shoulders, and he covers my sins. But what I wanted to say about flamenco as an art form is that I think it is one of the most perfect of the great musical traditions in our culture. And I think if you have a great foundation in flamenco like Paco does, it's one of the greatest preparations for any musician, of just general musicianship. I think obviously the rhythm is absolutely unthinkable for us. I mean, the perfection of the rhythmic sense of a flamenco legend like Paco is scare you to death. Scare you to death.
Don't I know?
As you know, I mean, we don't even know something is wrong. He goes, no, you're like all off. You're like, you're nowhere. You were absolutely nowhere, and you didn't even know it. That's how bad it is. So the perfection of the rhythm, of course, that goes for granted, but also the depth of a great flamenco spirit like Paco, which there are not very many, obviously, in the history of flamenco. But the depth, the profundity of it, the directness of the honesty, the expressivity, the passion, the spontaneity, And the thing that the old cliche, they call duende, but it's really, you know, it don't mean a thing if it ain't got that swing in what we say in America. And that's really, really true of the flamenco. They have, I think, the great flamenco artists are really looking for that thing that we call magic, which we're all looking for in music. And it just seemed to me that flamenco is the most wonderful preparation for any of this. In fact, the few times I was able to speak with Paco de Lucía, I say, you know, Paco, is really, a musician of your caliber shouldn't leave this planet and not play the music of Bach. How can this be? He said, oh, you know, you're kind of right, you know, but of course they never went anywhere. But of all the flamenco greats, and I've known quite a few of them, Paco is the only one really who's been brave enough to make an attempt. And I knew he could do all of this stuff. I knew he could play Scarlatti beautifully and Bach beautifully and even Mendelssohn beautifully, as you will hear. And in fact, what's so great about the combination is that Paco does things that you or I would never think of.
Well, I was going to ask.
I know it's your experience.
I was going to ask Paco, when the Mendelssohn particularly, just when you play that, do you find you're in any way altering your sound or your playing or your...
Well, yes, I try to. I try to express what the song is obvious to me. What the song is trying to say. I mean, it's just sensitive and wonderful, but it's not something that I'm not familiar with, in the sense of I have appreciated classical music for many, many decades, let alone years, and also not only that, but I've always been, from very, very young, fascinated with getting a better sound,
yes,
a better tone. So even that in flamenco, with a flamenco sound, is an improvement. But that you discover the subtlety and the range and the potential from listening to classical music. I say that in a general sense. Obviously, flamenco has got value as well. I'm not saying that it hasn't. But so I've always been fascinated with the quality of sound, trying to do the best I can out of the guitar. But in that particular case, simply I have to sing the song, you know, as I play it, in the way that I feel it was meant to be done. So yes, I mean, there is an approach, and obviously it may be the wrong approach, of course, but it's certainly an approach.
Well, that brings up the question of, is there even a right and wrong in that, in that sense, artistically? But on that same token, Eliot, I mean, what would you, since you have the guitar in your hands, what would you advise, quote, you both of us teach classical guitar students, what aspects of flamenco technique would you really recommend to a classical guitar student?
Well, I think they ought to, as I've tried to do, you know, if you can find a flamenco player to teach you, or if you can, to get, you know, I'm sure there's all this stuff online and videos and everything now that, you know, that wasn't available when I started to get interested in flamenco. But I think the sound of the flamenco is in a lot of our stuff, you know. Even you think the cadenza of the Aranjuez. If you imagine that this is a capo, and you know, it's all here, and then this Phrygian thing was in so many of our pieces, or the piece I'm going to play tonight. You know, if you do. It's this position, but maybe in flamenco they would have a cejilla here, so. But it's you know, these things that when I started to go back and look at classical guitar music, and I realized that the composers are actually, you know, writing by ear these things, and maybe in flamenco they had a cejilla, you know.
Right. Well, when I watch you play there, I mean, one of the big things.
I mean, that's the wrong key, right? It's not in that key, but you can see it where it lies on the instrument, except that you're holding your finger down.
Right.
That kind of thing. Very, very interesting. Or even, as I was telling Paco, of the great pieces written for me recently, almost none of them is thinkable without the things I learned from Paco. You know, Barrio Seguenza, you know. this crazy rasgueado or the Bizarre concerto. That's the end of the first movement, you know, which if I hadn't been working with Paco, I wouldn't have had those techniques developed to be able to put them in front of the modern composers and get them, you know, to integrate that into so-called classical tradition. So, I mean, I think there's so many possible ways now. We live in a much more open world than we used to. So there's so many possible ways for things to flow in and out, and so this interests me a lot.
Yeah.
And if it hadn't been for Paco, you know, I would never have.
Do you actually, I mean, you mentioned the rasgueado. Do you actually teach your students, you know, rasgueado techniques?
Well, I'm not such a great teacher of it, but yes, I do what I can. Yeah.
Because they wouldn't have been, would you argue that wouldn't have been so 30, 40 years ago?
Are you kidding?
Yeah.
I mean, I loved, of course, Segovia was my mentor, my inspiration, and everything else. But I think now we would say that you know, looking back on it, maybe that wasn't the most successful moment of his career, when he was, you know, sort of, he always claimed that he loved the traditional flamenco, you know, that he didn't like the experiments, and then he sort of got into it with Paco de Lucía. They had an exchange, I think, that was a bit acrimonious. But, I mean, for me, I wanted to go the opposite direction from Segovia in that one point, especially when I met Paco in the early 80s and I really could see it live. I said, wow. For one thing, I thought that classical guitars, so many of the things we do are so unidiomatic, you know. And this flamenco sounds incredible, and of course it's complicated, but they won't do something stupid. You know, they won't do something that's just for some academic reason. It looks good on the page, but it sounds like shit on the instrument.
Right.
They won't do that. They're too smart to do that.
Listen, well, one thing is,
so when pieces are written for me, I'm always trying to go to imagine what would Paco do here? What would a great, you know, what would a great jazz guitarist do here? You know, because sometimes you change the notes just a little bit, and the composer loves it. It's better for the composer, better for the music, and to learn from these, you know, these geniuses of the guitar is something we should all be doing. So.
Yeah, that brings up another question just about Paco. I remember years ago, I had you playing when I first got a Smallman, and I listened to you playing the Smallman. I was like, oh, God, that's great. Why don't you do that? You play on that guitar. And so I want to talk a little bit about your relationship to your instrument. I mean, what is it about because tonight we're going to hear two different guitars. You should know that they're constructed differently. And you know, could you speak a little bit about your guitar and your relationship to the kind of, you know, you've dealt with one or two various makers, but there's one, or last time I checked, there was one that you had like 20 of his guitars or something.
Yeah, I know.
No, but what is it about what is it about, like, for instance, a classical guitar that you just can't quite play? Aesthetically, or
it's a curious thing. I mean, the flamenco sound, I mean, as Eliot says, it's a particular sound. You have to dwell in that sound. It's not like a classical sound. However, there are, as I pointed out before, there are elements, many elements in the classical spectrum of music that can benefit even the flamenco playing, and one learns from that. But the instrument itself has got to be very immediate. It's got to be very explosively coming out. The resonance of a classical guitar is unwelcome because too much is happening, but not necessarily complex stuff, but too much is happening, and if it mixes too much in a resonant kind of way, it goes in detriment of the music itself, the immediacy of the music. It's very rhythmical, so it's got to be sharp. Obviously, the sound has to be beautiful as well. So it is a particular sound. Now, when I started long ago, long ago, not when I started, but when I discovered classical music, I actually purposely wanted my guitar to have some of that quality as well.
Really?
So it needs the immediacy, but it also needs the potential to actually sing. I can't stand a guitar that they used to make in flamenco when the sound, if you press too hard, it dies on you. So I can't stand that. I prefer to play hard if I want to, but I still want the note to ring out. However, still has to have that immediacy, that sharpness of sound in flamenco. So the relationship is a complex relationship. I mean, I have many guitars, but always. It's not that I'm a collector. I don't collect guitars.
Right.
But I buy guitars, always thinking that I'm going to get a better one.
Right.
But it never kind of happens, because for that you have to invest a lot of time to actually developing an instrument. And if you are happy, if you have an instrument that you know is response in every angle that you want to do, then you're happy with that. You're not going to spend a lot of time actually trying another one out. I know that you do that because I know you very well, and you do like to change and to get different instruments. But that I'm not that brave. I'd rather stick to the instrument that I know, and I know will respond, rather than try others in that way. But the relationship with the instrument is, the guitar that I usually play, that is my best guitar, I mean, is kind of 30 or 40 years old, but it's still intact, it's still whole, and
right.
It projects fantastic, it sings, it's got beautiful sound, and it combines that quality that I said, little bit of extra.
Who's the maker?
Gerundino. He died some years ago.
Oh, okay.
Gerundino Fernandez. And I have many by him as well. Yeah, as I say, trying to get a better one.
Right.
Anyway, the one I'm playing now is not that one, but it's an equally good one, or perhaps not equally, but different, and that is for a reason, because the one I'm talking about, my guitar, it's got pegs.
Right.
Not
pegs.
machines.
And the point is,
I don't know how you do that, by the way.
Yeah.
I think I would. Well, I would probably just smash it after if it didn't go in.
Yeah.
Is that wrong? Maybe it wouldn't work as well. That's just me.
After you smashed it?
Yeah, would that probably, anyway, go on.
No, but it's easy, it's very easy. I mean, violins, you have pegs,
yeah.
So
I've heard.
No, the thing is, it's wonderful. You can tune and it's very accurate, everything is fine. However, I play a lot with my company, and that means that the 3 guitars have to be beautifully in tune. So it's much easier to tune with other people when you have machine heads than with that, because if I play alone, I don't mind.
Right.
But in this case, I just came from a big tour, and the next day kind of thing, I came here. So I just brought the same guitar that I've been playing.
Right.
So anyway, the relationship is an interesting thing. It is a relationship. I mean, I look after my instruments, but I don't mind if they look beat. The wood, the timber must be intact, and the sound is what counts. But I don't mind varnish being ugly.
Of course,
I
yeah.
don't care.
But I mean, and Eliot, do you find that, or when you did the record with Eliot, were you conscious about using a different guitar? Are you using a different guitar? I mean, are you, because you've played with many classical guitarists, including your wife. So, I mean, is it, because it is such a dramatic, different sound.
Well, yeah, but I think one of the things that first impressed me when I heard Paco in the early 80s, first time I heard him was in Germany, first time I heard him live. And I said, well, this is just a different, quality of sound than what we have heard from any flamenco player. So Paco, if you're going to combine with a flamenco player, you have the best chance with Paco, because the sound is really so beautiful, and so rich and everything. So that was part of the perhaps the success.
Es verdad.
Right. Part of the success. And then, of course, if we're playing classical things, sometimes I don't necessarily want the sound to be that homogeneous, because I want the parts to come out in an independent way. And if we're playing something, say Scarlatti, where he was really imitating the guitar on the harpsichord, then even more so. And then if you go to some of the Bach that we do together, where again, it's two-hand piano music, so basically Paco's the left hand and I'm the right hand of the, of the keyboard. And in those cases, again, I think maybe you don't want an absolutely matched perfectly, because it's sort of like string quartets. There's some string quartets that are, you know, perfectly homogenized, and then there are others where the sounds are almost a little bit more different. And I often like the string quartets that aren't so perfectly homogenized, because I think the variety of sound sometimes serves the music better. So first of all, if I need to find Paco's sound, I can always pretty much do it, I think. And secondly, sometimes it's an advantage to have more variety of sound, and use the whole palette, the whole flamenco palette and the whole classical palette, and that sometimes for me was an interesting aesthetic experience.
I'm hoping I don't know where Nate is, but I think we still have time. I want to ask a little bit about improvisation, and is there, you know, your world is filled with improvisation, and you're playing tonight solo, and there will be some improvisation.
Of course, there's always there is a lot of safety in improvisation.
Safety.
If you go wrong, you can disguise it as something that is, you know, you play with it.
Right.
But yes, it's always there. But also, I wouldn't pretend I would never pretend that a piece that I play is an improvised, you know, it's made on the spot. It is resources that I have, people have, you know, guitarists have in flamenco, which is to do with their ability, their pool of knowledge, their spontaneity in dealing with it, and so on. But it is things that you have experimented with before.
Right.
Sometimes you surprise yourself and something comes out which is completely new and different. But that, I mean, the putting together of a piece as you do it is always new. It's always as you feel at the time, and that there is a lot of room for improvising in that. But I'm dealing with material, with ideas that I have, of course, experimented with and I'm familiar with. So there is some improvisation, but I'm honest about it. I don't pretend that the piece is like a new piece. No, that piece will have a shape which perhaps is unique to that moment, but the shape is made of pieces of elements that I'm familiar with.
Right. I mean, and tonight, is there any improvisation between the two of you and the Farruko or the Colombianas that we're going to hear?
Light. On my part, light.
Light. L-I-T-E.
Improv light in his part, in his case. Yes.
Well, I can add this and that, but basically the piece is designed. It's already decided because we're
trying to stay together.
I mean, well, and on that note, we have talked about. I mean, I loved what you said about the Scarlatti and Bach. In terms of the picking of your world, of the flamenco world, let's say the Farruko or the Colombianas, what were you thinking would particularly work for this duo? Like, why did you choose those pieces?
Well, good question. The thing is, the Farruko is almost a classical piece. It's as a matter of fact, I should say, it is by Sabicas, you know.
Right, who has played in the States.
Citizen, of course.
Yeah.
A citizen, you know, who lived in the city and played all over here. Anyway, he was a wonderful guitarist, and he actually made that piece. It's not my piece, but it's such a beautiful. I mean, it is flamenco, of course, but the structure of it, it's almost like a classical piece. So it was very appropriate to combine the flamenco plus the classical approach. The Colombiana is a piece that I made many years ago, but it is kind of also a sort of understandable piece. It's not hugely complex rhythmically. You know, it moves along and in a recognizable key and so on. So I thought that was also a suitable piece for Eliot and I to play. And then we went rather more deep with other pieces. We don't put them in the program, but occasionally we do include some others, like Soleares, for example, which is very, very strong flamenco. Alegrías, which is also a very significantly different and more complex than the other two.
Right, and more complex in terms of rhythmic?
Rhythmically,
yeah.
yes.
Very subtle.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I just got a sign from my dear friend Nate that it unfortunately is time to wrap this up. I can't thank you enough, both of you, my brothers, for doing this tonight. Really incredible.